Hey everyone, it is time to review Clash of Heroes 3 Remaster Edition. For that, I'll be checking its story, gameplay, graphics and music. So let's begin. In this time around we have the chance to start in different schools. Now, I don't really know how some future events will develop, but if my guess is right, they will be rather similar regarding teachers, some quests and details like that. The difference comes with the jobs you have at first, but if I am honest, just choose whatever you like the most. Story-wise, we have a small introduction about the school, what's the main topic about it, and the kinds of specialties the other institutes have. In my case, I chose Presiana Institute, just because I like the uniform. In any case, there's no real story progression until you pretty much start to look at the other institutes. Prior to that, it is more about the classic, hey, could you help me with this task or the other thing, etc, etc. In this case, at the moment we reach the Draken Institute, they start to talk about some of the heroes and villains in this tale. In this case, about the Arch Sorcerer Agathion, who tried to bring back a Dark Lord named Agoramorph. But as the discussion moves forward, things between Celsia and this girl start to heat up, so we need to beat the heck out of her. I am not sure if it is worth mentioning that this whole expedition began because our questionable fella wanted to find his brother, who was supposed to appear in a concert or something like that. And yep, you need to visit the other institutes in order, otherwise you won't trigger story events. Anyways, once you reach the third institute, and after some small conversations, you will find Amaryllis. However, there is something weird going on, as he's able to use some dark powers, so you beat the heck out of him. After this, you decide to search deeper into this whole situation. My guess is that something similar may happen if you start with the other institutes, just changing antagonists. To not spoil future events, what can I say in general about this story? To me it was decent. I mean, it isn't a story you will get engaged really hard, but if you enjoy some dumb humor from time to time, yep, I'm sure you will laugh. And just because of that I will say it is decent. I mean, once you read some of the very last sections regarding the whole conflict and the ego of a particular character, you will find hilarious some lore things, but that is just if you kinda pay attention to what is going on. Aside from that, it may feel a bit trivial, but I gotta be honest, I liked some of the secondary characters. I believe some had quite interesting writing, of course regarding jokes and dumb comments. I would give it a 7. Unfortunately to me it is a bit disappointing because the previous entry had a much better story once you reach the second half, or the serious half of the story. But here some moments are toned down a lot. There's even a point when they pretty much throw the whole conflict out of the window. So yeah, it is entertaining, but it may not sit that well for everyone. Gameplay wise, Clash of Heroes 3 is a DRPG or first-person dungeon crawler, where we can choose one of 3 schools. The main difference lies in the kinds of jobs we will have at first, but don't worry too much about that, because down the line once you have the chance to visit the other institutes, you will get some extra jobs, and under a specific quest, you can unlock some others like the samurai, so keep an eye open unless you want to advance with what you have at hand. Of course, on this front we will follow the classic idea, where we can create some characters, so as usual take some time to reroll points, check skills, magics and little details like that, because thank goodness this Clash of Heroes discarded the crappy idea about alignment. Now within races, all of them have different growths and special jobs. For example, humans are fairly balanced, so if you want to min-max they aren't the best, but they have access to the gunner job, and like that each race has a special job and different kinds of growths. The assigned job also affects, so try to keep in mind what you wanna do. In my case, I created a cookie cutter team, 4 damage dealers, 3 on the front line, 1 in the back, and 2 support units. One focused on buffs and debuffs, while the other was a heavy healer, with some extra magics just in case. At first you can add but one job, and as you level it up you will unlock skills and magics, which efficiency increases as you get 100% with said class. Once you reach something like the mid of the game, you get a chance to add a secondary job. The only catch here is that you need to level it up, so it has to be assigned as a main class, otherwise in my experience it doesn't increase points. What happens is that your secondary job won't give you anything until you increase some points of your main class, even if the secondary job is at 100%. So I do recommend to be a bit conservative while assigning secondary classes. I mean, if you change the whole group right away, you may have problems in some dungeons, so change something like 2 or 3 of them at a time. It is worth keeping in mind that some classes require much more experience to be trained. For example, the Photomancer takes longer in comparison to the Fighter. Okay, my main complaint with this execution is that there is no real benefit if you wanna train more than 2 classes, and that feels quite meh. On this front, it would have been much more interesting if you had a chance to, let's say, inherit a skill or a magic, like in other DRPGs we have seen in this channel. So I will say, do not waste that much your time and try to choose wisely the jobs you wanna get. That way you will be able to advance relatively fast. In Class of Heroes 3 there is a new mechanic that comes in the kind of relationships your unit have one another. Try to experiment, as this system is kinda gimmicky. For each like, you need to add a dislike, but in the process you may reduce the affinity of some units, which results in stat penalties. As far as I saw, this system takes the same ideas as previous games, so there are some races that get along with others, and of course they also dislike some here and there. But do not limit yourself. In my case, I just linked a couple of characters to have some extra HP, then something like a special attack that can be spammed every now and then. But let's imagine that your whole team has been set. It is time to dive into the dungeons. In comparison with the previous entries, Class of Heroes 3 is kinda easy, or at least I didn't face annoying moments like in the first game where you mindlessly move around without having the chance to cast magics, or crappy traps that dispel your floating skills. Nonetheless, do not underestimate its difficulty. Try to level up a bit before advancing some rooms, as you will feel little spikes if you try to rush through the game. Or at least that is how I saw a game over almost right away. Yep, increase some levels, change the most basic gear and try to have a strategy. I could say that this feeling of difficulty spikes will be a bit persistent. From time to time you will face quite strong enemies and bosses, so try to save kinda constantly. You may ask, is there a way to reduce that kind of feeling while playing? And yeah, nope. I don't think it will change unless you're really lucky with drops, because it takes a while before you can properly equip each party member. So as I have said before, patience is a virtue. At least I could say that I faced like 3 or 4 of those moments. As for the general level design, in my humble opinion it was quite interesting. There aren't annoying and cryptic quests as the previous games. What do I mean with this? You won't be asked to retrieve an item with really low chances to be dropped. In general, each time you are asked for something, that something can be found in the area you are sent, and some items can be cheesed if you take note of what is sold in each area. On another topic, I will argue that the alchemy is as obsolete as the previous games, until you are pretty much diving into the post-content. However, if you do not want to use a lot of time while farming materials and so on, you can save some chests. That way you can change your equipment for decent things relatively fast. However, if you know what you're doing, the alchemy can be slightly cheese, but I'll let you find that on your own. As for bosses, there are no surprises in this game, so for the most part I will say that they are easy. I mean, you can save before every interrogation sign you find, and check if you have what it takes to beat them. If you ask me, few were the times where I got my arse handed. I could say that battles became harder once you reached the last section of the game. That is the only point where I saw up to 2 or 3 game overs one after another. Aside from that, the real challenges can be found in the post-content. With this, I will give the gameplay an 8. I enjoyed the general experience. I mean, I like that they got rid of annoying mechanics to reclass units. The same with questionable dungeons and quests, so you can actually enjoy your time while diving into different dungeons and looking for the main objectives. However, it is fair to mention that some ideas need some extra polish, or better rewards if you wanna take another step with class combinations. In the graphics section, I checked glitches, aesthetics, performance, and other visual things. This is the Switch version of the game, played on the Switch 2. It never froze, and I had no issues in detriment of the experience. However, it seems like someone slept on the keyboard while writing things, because the description that explains how the secondary classes work makes a bit of sense. Just try to read this. Okay, little details aside, I gotta say that I like the general art of the game. I believe the first areas were quite beautiful, or this meadow was something I liked. It had little details that caught my eye. Maybe my only deal is that it was a bit confusing understanding if there were walls or not, so you had me bumping kinda constantly. This happened in a couple of areas. I felt like the depths were a bit messed up. Maybe I am used to playing inside dungeons where they are much more defined because they tend to be narrow corridors. I wonder why. In the previous entry, also remastered version, they decided to update the perimeter of the maps, but here they kept it as when the first game was launched. Yeah, that brown color doesn't really help. Another detail or group of details I didn't like that much is that there were no extra sprites for your character. Here you have but 4 main sprites and some hair changes. I kinda get why it was decided to reduce the number of options, but if I am honest, I would have liked to have some more of them. In face of these events, the Tails look is good enough. And my last complaint, which is a classic, repainted enemies to no end. There are plenty of repainted enemies. I would have taken some of the previous enemies and simply throw them into the game, just to have some diversity. And what can I say? Some of these designs are quite boring or they feel out of place. Oh well, it is what it is, I guess. Aside from those details, I believe Class of Heroes 3 has some nice ideas. At least, I felt that some bosses were much more interesting in comparison with previous entries. The same idea goes for the dungeons. While it is true that you end up exploring lots of caves, they felt much livelier, in comparison to something like libraries or weird looking buildings, that for some reason were abundant. The number of options or unique looking areas was increased in a much better way. At least I wasn't signing in disapproval every now and then because of the same or similar environment. I would give it another 8. I gotta say that I enjoy the charming ideas this game has. It is always nice to see some silly executions in between serious scenarios, or at least that is my perception. However, there is definitely room for improvement when we start to talk about enemy sprites and some repainted ideas. And last but not least, it's music. I am happy to say that this game had interesting ideas as the previous entry. Multiple dungeons were of my liking, having a good variety of rhythms. In general, we could summarize them as ambience tracks. But diving slightly more into executions, some added cheesy electronic ambience. Some others used some choirs, reminiscent to those you can hear in some religions. Some others were calm as heck. In my humble opinion, it was a good experience. The same could be said about combat themes. It is worth mentioning that in this time around, some choices were taken in a conservative way, because the main combat theme feels like a remix from the second combat theme you hear in the previous entry. And unfortunately there are no changes on this front. Yeah, I won't deny that those electronic executions were quite catchy, and that it throws some unexpected rock tunes. However, in the long run they start to feel a bit repetitive, and I believe that diminishes a bit experience, despite having cool tracks. To me, it is another 8. While it had some amazing ideas, some others felt a bit repetitive. Class of Heroes 3 Remaster is a 7.8. It is above decent, but as there are steps forward in comparison to the previous games, there are also steps backwards, particularly its story. Yes, it is entertaining and you might laugh a bit here and there, but I believe it is easily forgettable. While it improved the job system, it felt like there was no real reward once you start to change classes, and I believe it needed a little extra push to make it much more engaging. So I cannot recommend this game to everyone, but for those who truly enjoy old school ideas, because that is what you're going to find here, and if that doesn't sound appealing to you, then why force yourself? But if you wanna have a decent challenge, then you're going to have fun while playing Class of Heroes 3. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.